Hi, friends. Reverend Cole here with another episode of Questions for Cole. It is October 28th, 2020. A very interesting question was posed to me this past week, one that made me think back over my 28, 29 years of ministry so far. The question was this: Cole, I was just wondering, what's the most annoying or disruptive thing that's happened during one of your worship services? What a question to ask. Good one. First of all, I must say that there have actually been very few incidents. I think I've been lucky, but there have been a few through the years, and those few have certainly stayed with me. And whenever I think about them, they make me laugh. Those stories, although they were certainly disruptive and annoying at the time, certainly made life more interesting. As I said, there have been a fairly small number of those kinds of episodes over the years, thank goodness. I'll share four of them with you, but I think I better split it up over two episodes. The stories might be a bit long to share all four at once. So two today and two next week. Something to look forward to. The first one is one of my very first memories in ministry ever. This was actually before I was ordained. It happened during my internship 30 years ago or so now. I was in Invermay, Saskatchewan. It was actually a 4-point charge, but this particular Sunday morning, it was the service in Invermay that I remember. I'll never forget it. Preaching one of my very first sermons ever. I was nervous. I was very new at leading worship, hoping that everything would go smoothly, hoping that people were listening, hoping that I wasn't making a mess of it. Looking back on it now, I wonder if perhaps God decided that I needed something to break the ice, something to break the tension, something that we could all have a good laugh about. Maybe. Anyway, there I was, in the middle of my sermon, trying to concentrate on what I was doing, making sure I didn't lose my place, making sure I was making eye contact, making sure I wasn't losing the congregation. There were probably about 15 or 20 people in attendance that day at that small country church. And among those 15 or 20 people included a couple of young families, but they seemed to be quiet. One of the littlest ones had been making a bit of noise near the beginning of the service, but they seemed to be fairly quiet now that the sermon had started. I hadn't noticed at the time, but apparently the parents had sent the littlest angel into the playroom, an open area just off the back of the sanctuary, just around the corner, but still visible from the back few pews, really only about 50 feet or maybe less from the pulpit itself. Anyway, littlest angel was just around the corner, presumably playing with the soft toys and soft books that were there for the children to help keep them quiet during the service. Me, I'm blissfully unaware of the little one's presence since they're being so good, so quiet. And then, all of a sudden, right in the middle of what I'm sure was a very important moment or thought or moment in the sermon, we all hear this sound at the same time. Brought my sound effects to help. Jack in the Box. I mean, why? What? Who? Who would have a Jack in the Box as a child's toy at the back of a church? Especially when the church is so small. That's not a soft toy. It's not a quiet toy. Why? Of course, I was completely thrown off. I stammered my way through the rest of the sermon. No idea what I said at that point or whether or not it was coherent. Probably not. But here's the best part, or the worst part, depending on your perspective. Nobody moved. Nobody intervened on my behalf. Nobody seemed to care that this was happening. And of course, even though every pair of eyes in the sanctuary was directed at me, it was obvious that they were no longer listening to me if they ever were. Nobody could concentrate on anything but this circus-like sound coming from just a few feet behind them. Funny little melody, followed by that pause, and then we all just waited for the pop goes the weasel. I wonder now, what people must have been thinking. They were probably wondering how this would affect me, young minister in the pulpit. Probably wondering what I would do about it, actually. They were probably just enjoying the moment, highly entertained at my discomfort. Well, I'm glad I could provide some amusement on their otherwise boring Sunday morning. You're welcome, Invermay, Saskatchewan, wherever you are. I hope you enjoyed it. To be honest, that has actually become one of my favorite stories, even though I wasn't exactly enjoying myself in the moment. But I certainly do see the humor in it now. Moral of the story, if you're supplying the church with some soft, quiet toys, Jack in the Box is probably not needing to be near the top of the list. Thanks for that. And that was just the first story. The other one that I'll share today involves a wedding. It's a shorter story. I'll start with the moral of that story. The moral of the story is make sure you talk to the photographer before the service starts so that the photographer understands that there are certain places that they shouldn't be and certain times when they shouldn't be taking pictures. This was one of my first weddings, and I hadn't learned that lesson yet. So picture, if you will, me standing at the front of the church with the bride on the right and the groom on the left and the photographer during the entire ceremony, every few seconds, and I'm not exaggerating that, every few seconds, moving from one side of the sanctuary to the other, looking for a better angle, moving in and out between the groomsmen, between the bridesmaids, a foot away from the bride and groom, during the prayers, during the vows, during the kiss, blocking the view of the parents and the other guests right beside me for a while, so close that I could have punched him, which I didn't, and I've always regretted that. Moving around behind me in the choir loft, I could sense him at one point standing on one of the pews in the choir, hovering over us like an angel, but then again, not like an angel at all, unless angels are annoying and intrusive and irritating and aggravating and infuriating and exasperating and big jerks. But I don't think they are. So anyway, back to the moral of the story. If you're planning a wedding, whether you're a minister or a bride or a groom or a member of the wedding party, someone, anyone, just make sure you have a chance to chat with the photographer before the ceremony. Before the ceremony. Now, I will say that 95% of photographers are awesome. They know what they're doing. They don't want to be the center of attention. They set themselves up in the best spot to get the shots they need. They move very infrequently, and you hardly even know that they're there. But the other 5%, they are out there, and they will disrupt the proceedings. So there, you've been warned. And those are two of my 4 stories that I'd love to share with you about things that have been annoying or disruptive in a service. That's enough for this week. For the other 2 stories, tune in again next Wednesday for the next installment of Questions for Cole. See you then.